Hey everybody, and welcome to the third installment of the Real Talk webinar series with the PreSales Collective. I'm your host, Joe Caprio, and I'm really excited for today's event. We're just going to kind of hang for a second here before we get into the content as we let some more folks jump in. The waiting room takes a minute to kind of filter in for some reason on Zoom. So we'll just kind of hang for a minute and let everyone get dialed in. But yeah, today's actually going to be a fun session. We had a prep call last week where we kind of ran through the survey and the topics, and I'm excited. I think we've got a live one today. We should be fun. How are you folks all doing today for the panelists?
Doing good.
Awesome.
Doing well.
Oh boy, with this energy, we can't lose. Oh man, Julian, how's the mentorship program, the accelerator program?
It's been growing great. For context, we started this mentorship program to help underrepresented populations to break into the tech community. And so we have 4 mentees right now, basically doing some AE onboarding, preparing them for an AE or CSM role at the end. And we're about, I think, almost a month and a half into the program. It's been going great so far. So we're super excited and just grateful for the opportunity.
It's amazing. It's so cool. Very cool. Okay, why don't we give folks just a couple more minutes. I'm really pleasantly surprised by how many folks are already in the session. But you know, it's Wednesday morning, maybe Wednesday afternoon for some folks. So Julian, you're laughing like days of the week exist anymore.
Yeah, they always blend together. It's like the different feelings. Like, oh, we're halfway through. Okay. This should be a Wednesday. Maybe it's a Thursday.
Oh, beautiful. And just so you know, we got a nice chat from a friend of yours, Julian. He says he's only here because you rock.
Oh,
I believe that to be the case. Yeah.
Wow.
I agree with that.
I appreciate it. We'll catch up later, Jared. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. It's really fun to do these webinars in the PreSales Collective because it's like, I mean, the whole point is it's a community. And so, you know, half the people in here and you've had really fun like Slack threads and other conversations. So it's nice to kind of do these events. Oh, I see. And then I think Steven is arguing with Jared and he said he's only here for Patty. Are we really going to play favorites with our panelists? It's like the who's your favorite Chris or who's the best Chris Avengers that was going on for a while, and nobody likes poor Chris Pine. No, everybody likes Chris Pine. Nobody likes Chris Pratt. All right, icebreaker for another session. Who's your favorite Avenger? All right, why don't we start the content here? And so again, I'm Joe Caprio. I'm the co-founder at Reprise, and we are the first platform for pre-sales to create and customize tailored demos. And so I'm really excited to be a part of the pre-sales community and, you know, do this ongoing series of webinars. And if we go to the next slide, we'll kind of just tap today's session is the third that we've done. And we started with, you know, sales versus pre-sales, having an open forum, open discussion with what are the things that the sales reps do that really make your life terrible, and how should pre-sales, you know, prevent or react to those mistakes. And that was a lot of fun. So we did a New Year's resolution session last month where we talked about what are the big changes that pre-sales pros should be working towards this year. And it almost kind of devolved into what are the big changes that these companies should be making for pre-sales. And so it's set up to be like, what are the New Year's resolutions your organization should make, which I thought was a lot of fun. This time, we're going to talk specifically about process, about sales process, and just about process in general, and how the pre-sales team kind of becomes the gatekeeper and the enforcer of that process, and how it can be a burden, but also if we do it right, how it can really be an accelerator to both the pre-sales career and understanding of what it means to go to market and ultimately your company's growth. And so process is really important, and it tends to fall to the pre-sales team. So I'm pumped to kind of go through this content today with the panelists. And then next month, we'll talk about the new customer journey. And so that'll be the fourth session of Real Talk. But for now, why don't we have the panelists kind of jump in and introduce themselves? And I'm really straightforward. I'm going to go left to right here. And we're going to have the panelists talk about their name, their title, their organization. And for an icebreaker, we had a lot of fun on this on our prep session. We're going to tell an interesting story about our name. So we're going to go name, title, organization, and an interesting story about our name, while my colleague George has launched the first survey, the first poll, so folks can take the poll while learning about the panelists. We're going to go left to right, starting with Patty. Kick us off, please.
All right. Good morning. Good afternoon. Happy 2 weeks away from 2020. I think we're all happy about that. So Patty Hager, I lead the North America PreSales engineering group at Lenovo, specifically in the intelligent device side of Lenovo's organization. I'm sitting in the Raleigh-Durham area. My name, although it has 5 characters in it, it's probably the most mispronounced and misspelled name I've ever seen. It's not Hager, the men's slacks company, or it's not Hager is in the singer Sammy Hagar in the 1980s. So it is Hager. So with that, Joe, I'll pass it to the next person.
Thank you very much, Patty. And I'm going to kick to my friend Julian, who, represents the tall, where I represent the big, from Big and Tall shops, where we both have bought Hager slacks, I'm sure, in our life. So, Julian, name, title, organization, and an interesting story about your name.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, it's not easy being 6'8", but no one can tell in Zoom. I'm Julian Mackrell, or Mackrell, either one doesn't matter. I'm a solution engineer over at Chorus. Been there for almost 3 years at this point. We really help the pre-sales and post-sale teams, both from a technical aspect and a strategy aspect, and super excited to talk about process today, because that's a big topic internally as well. And I guess a fun, interesting fact about my name, Mackerel, it's actually Irish. And my great-great-great-grandfather was on a slave ship coming to the US when it caught fire, swam ashore and moved up to Canada and married into an Irish family. So I'm part Irish, I guess, and I have an Irish last name.
Julian, that's incredible. We're going to have a mean fail at following that. It's
there's no way. There's no way I can follow that.
Right. Name, title, organization, and some amazing heroic story about your name, please.
Sounds great. So my name is Amin Ibrahim. I'm a director of commercial solutions consultants over at Hootsuite, where we help people around the world get super awesome at social media. And my name is actually a fairly common Egyptian name, named after my grandfather, and nowhere near as exciting as Julian's name story, but that's okay.
Beautiful. So
Not
we're
yet.
actually
Not
not as famous yet. Yeah, we are new Hootsuite customers here at Reprise too, which we're really excited about. So
I love it.
Okay, why don't we kick to Roxana? Name, title, organization, and an interesting story about your name.
Of course. So hi, everybody. I'm Roxana Farshi. I'm a pre-sales manager focusing on strategic sourcing at Workday, previously coming over from the Scout RFP acquisition. And a fun fact about my name, my last name, I'm Persian, and my last name, Farshi, actually means rug maker or rug merchant. So Persian carpets come from my family, or at least my family used to sell them.
Beautiful. I'll wrap us up really quickly. I'm Joe Caprio, co-founder at Reprise, and my name is Joseph A. Caprio, with the A standing for Augustino. So I'm named for my 2 grandfathers on my father's side, Joseph and Augustino. My dad was Joseph Anthony Caprio, so we're both Joseph A. Caprio, but I'm not a junior. And the difference is the A stands for something different. That has not stopped all 3 credit bureaus from attaching all of my dad's horrible decisions to my credit score. And so this is a really fun recurring confusion that I get to clear up every time I want to buy a house or a car or do anything that involves credit. So really cool name story for me. Let's move into today's content. We're going to have a lot of fun today talking about something that may feel a little dry at first blush, but it's process. And we're going to focus on 6 key pieces of process, or 6 key moments where process would benefit a company. And all of these processes will either really accelerate the growth of a business, or, if you don't do this stuff, it'll lend to infighting and, low NPS from your customers, churn, and like slowed revenue growth. And so it's really important to a business. Unfortunately, it could feel like leadership puts these rules in place and then turns their back and never really enforces it, or looks to see if it's enforced. And because the pre-sales team is a very organized, like detail process oriented team, it can often feel like you're left defending and enforcing the process that somebody else thought of and didn't really put a structure in place. And so it can become a really challenging dynamic, and it can create friction across departments where you're really just doing your job and helping the business, but it can almost feel like, you're finger wagging at people. And so we're going to focus on 6 of these moments, and we're going to talk about why it matters and how to do it right. And so, how do you prevent bad fits or time wasters from racing into a late stage and chewing up resources and taking trials? Right? How do you prevent bad customers, from actually, or bad buyers from becoming deals? And so, it's not going to be a fit. It's going to lead to a really painful CX experience and ultimately a churn. How do you stop that while taking money away from a salesperson? How do you make sure the sales team is actually marching to the rhythm that your leaders set and following that sales methodology that they spent $250,000 to buy and implement? How do you make sure new customers actually get what they asked for and they don't just get stuck in onboarding? Once they are productive customers, how do you surface the expansion potential and kind of play that cross-functional role where you're a little bit sales, you're a little bit service, and you're highlighting expansion potential, but not being money hungry? Okay. And then how do you make sure the feedback gets to the R&D team, feature requests and bug reporting? How do you make sure that they're getting a holistic view of what really needs to be worked on as a business? And so we're kind of going to take these things, we're going to chop them up one at a time. And we're going to start with my friend Julian, who enforced a lot of process for me when we overlapped at Chorus. And we're going to go into bad deals, not getting a trial. And so, Jules, kind of take us away here on this first topic. How do we stop this, and how do we work on it?
It's a good question. That's very hard. I think it depends on the industry you're in. Like for us at Chorus, we're in such a new vertical. People haven't bought our software before. They're not really sure how to evaluate. So part of our process is not just helping the AEs like enforce, do we follow MedPIC correctly, but also helping the customers understand the process in evaluating. We're all kind of conditioned now, especially being at home, to do things instantaneously. Like on our phone, you want to use Uber Eats to order food, you just do it. You don't talk to anyone. When you're evaluating new software, if you're not an experienced buyer, you don't really know what you're looking for. You see some features and you think that's what you want, but you don't actually know how you're going to use it. So a lot of what we're doing internally right now is training our AEs, training our customers on how to basically evaluate software, making sure we're aligning to the end goals they need to find, setting up that success criteria, not just for us to say, hey, we checked all these boxes, you got to buy, but to make sure that the customer is getting the value they want out of the process. I guess I'll stop there. Make sure we really solve the problems they actually have and not just solving a surface level pain.
That's really fascinating. So there's almost like a checkpoint on the way in where you're not necessarily just enforcing process, you're asking questions that would help the customer and help the rep. Like, what are you shopping for? What is a trial supposed to look like to you? Therefore, let me set up an engagement that makes sense. But if you can't get to a point where you align on an engagement that makes sense, then I think it would be like a mutual understanding at that point that maybe this isn't the right time for a POC. That's an interesting take, like do it as an intake call versus just a checkpoint in the process. What else do we think? I mean, how do you feel about preventing, bad buyers from moving forward and chewing up resources?
That I think comes. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
Yeah, so it definitely a great question, and I don't think we should limit it to just trials either, right? Because those bad buyers are going to chew up a whole ton of our resources, and a lot of times they take us down dead ends. So there's a lot of things that we can do to try to avoid that. There's things that we can do in terms of automation. There's things that we can do in terms of extra qualification. The only thing I'd add to this as well is that I know we focus a lot on process. The one thing I'd add is that it's important for us not to become too dogmatic with our process. I've seen situations in the past where, for example, you've got this certain revenue threshold. Like if they don't hit this one criteria or that criteria, we can't give them a trial, or we can't give them a demo, or any of those other things. And sometimes that could lead us to losing that deal, potentially burning bridges with our partners in sales. So part of the art of mastering these processes and working well together with our partners is knowing when to really push back hard on the process and when to be a little bit flexible, because it could actually have a great outcome for us.
I totally agree. Roxana, how do you think, why don't we put a period on this one? Like, how do you actually make sure that this is working properly?
Definitely. So I think to Amin's point, right, it's not just a trial, it's a lot more than that. And this is actually something I'm super passionate about, starting my career out at different startups where at the beginning, you hand out trials like candy, right? Because you're trying to get proof, you're trying to get people to even look at your product or think about your product. And you kind of need that in the beginning. Once you get to a place where, okay, we're getting enough traction in the market, there's different types of proof that you can have. So what I've done is I've created actually a proof checklist, and there's 3 different types of proofs that you can do, whether it's a custom demo, something where you get into a system, an actual pilot, or a workshop where you're doing a trial, but you're hands-on. It's in a couple of hours and you're really holding your hand through the process. We also created a checklist that is a pre, during, and post checklist. What are all the things we need to make sure that we're doing to ensure that they are a good buyer? We're doing, as John Barrow says, appropriate give gets as part of that process as well. And lastly, I've actually detailed this checklist to be for both AEs and for SEs. And the reason why that's so important is that, again, sales teams, there are partners, and we really want to make sure that it's mutual respect as part of that process. We're working together. We are one organization towards the same goal. So by detailing out the checklist of, hey, AE, I need you to go do this thing. SE, let's make sure that we understand what their needs are. Let's create some detailed success criteria for whatever proof we decide to do. Get the buy-in from the prospect. That way we know they're a real buyer and that they're agreeing that if we go through these proof steps, this is something that could work for them.
Incredible. I think it's something we hear a lot, but having the either collateral or at least muscle memory that you can show reps like this is what it's supposed to look like, I think is paramount. I want to call on Patty, but I want to shift gears a little bit and maybe go to the second topic, which is pretty connected. It's about, and actually, I mean, it to your point, it's not just trials, it's preventing bad deals and it's preventing, multiple steps along the way, but specifically like bad customers, right? Patty, how do you think at Lenovo about preventing bad fit customers from ultimately becoming a customer?
Right. Super important, because it's all about making sure that your brand in the market positively shines on the value you're providing. So I think the first thing, Joe, is understanding ideal customer criteria. Like, we know those clients where our use cases fit so squarely with their business challenges. And we know examples of where we've been able to provide exceptional value. So, kind of writing that down, just as Roxana said, having kind of that checklist. What's an ideal customer criteria for the different solutions you're selling? That's first and foremost. Secondly, it's making sure that you're doing adequate, and I would almost say exceptional discovery with your client, so that you're really knowing that we have a great fit.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I agree. Go ahead, Julian.
I was going to say, I think that absolutely makes sense. It's interesting, like Lenovo versus Chorus. We're a completely different type of company, and when you're a startup, sometimes you can't afford to lose those different deals or not have them, and it's a really tricky situation to be in, to be pushing back against your seller and your partner and saying this is really not a good fit for the company. And I think at that point, it really comes down to the relationships you have internally, that internal selling with leadership, making sure you're all aligned on the overall company vision, even though your function or your role is specific to one point in the process.
think that when you're early, actually, Julian, to your point, this is interesting to me. I think that when you're early, you think that you have a good idea of what the use cases are for your product, right? But when you're a startup, those use cases might shift. And so I think that to your point of talking to product and talking to strategy about it, like, okay, this is a use case we've never heard of before. We think it's very strange, but wait a minute, could it actually work? And is this a whole area where we've yet to uncover? So keeping your mind open about those is also so important, that we're not, to the point, I forget which panelist mentioned this earlier, it might've been Amin, of just, this is our process. If you are $1 lower than the threshold, we're not going to do it. This is our product. But instead thinking, wait a minute, we can go a little bit outside the box.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point. They're all fantastic points. And thinking about that and thinking about the discovery piece at the beginning and thinking about how customers are buying these days, like we're seeing more and more people coming with checklists. We're seeing more and more RFPs, RFIs, all that fun stuff. And you've got this big laundry list of, I need to do these 12 different things. And sometimes we'll look at it and we'll check off 11 of the 12 and think that we're good to go and this will be a good customer. But again, looping back to that discovery piece, that one that we don't do might be the most important thing that they have to do. And they're guaranteed going to churn within a year if we go down this path. So I think it's really important to keep that piece in mind. And with regards to the relationships and how we push back on some of these things, at least knowing that people are aware of the risks if we go down this path, right? So we're an early product. We think we're going to have this in 2 years. We think that's going to meet the need of this customer by then when they need it. This is the risk. Do we go ahead or not? I think having those discussions front and center help a ton.
I mean, it's wild because it's like, I'm sorry, Roxana, I'll go really fast. It's wild because when I see RFPs from a customer or like a vendor matrix, I really get worried about it, that there are 8 rows in the table and, visually they get equally weighted.
Yeah.
And the reality is usually just 1 or 2 things really, really matter for the success of the project. Yet you're really worried there are 8 things on the matrix and, your strength might be overshadowed by something that doesn't matter. You're kind of flipping that. You're flipping that and saying this customer had 8 asks and we hit 7 of them. The only thing we don't hit is the mission critical piece that's going to make them churn. And so it's really kind of like we know the risk of getting into a matrix style eval, but we're not really thinking of the risk to ourselves of doing a matrix style customer success evaluation.
Yeah, it's why RFPs are every SC's favorite thing ever, right?
I mean, those weights and those points are so important. So in that discovery, trying to figure that out. But just to get sassy for a minute here, right?
Please.
Not just like maybe a bad customer fit in terms of what they need, but what if the people kind of suck, for lack of better words? Like they won't give you success criteria. They won't work with you. They're not very nice. What is the threshold of, wait, I don't want my CS team to have to deal with someone like this or a company like this? When do we decide that?
That's a really interesting question, Roxana. So I had a CS leader that I've worked with in the past that, in the scoping call during an evaluation, we would have a sales engineer join the call and they would stay attached to the deal post-sale and were ultimately tasked with a successful deployment of the project. And there was a field in our CRM that the SC would fill in after the scoping call. And the field, I'll give you the Salesforce name. It is _ asshole _ C. And it was a binary check. Is this prospect an asshole? And the sales engineer would fill it in, yes or no, this person's an asshole. And then we measured the ultimate renewal rate when that box was checked or not. And, sure enough, there was real correlation between not renewing the assholes. And so you have to wonder, like, is there a qualitative, can we work together element to not letting bad deals become customers?
I mean, it's important, whether that's a checkbox field. In my previous life, we had actually a hidden red, yellow, green field. Because this was actually, before an SE even joined the organization at a previous company. And so it was CSMs and they filled it out like red, yellow, green. I don't feel good about this, but it was hidden from the sales team. so that they wouldn't see it because they were too scared of letting the AE know. And it just was an outlet of indicating that. But I think this is important in this day and age. We have to have people that we want to work with to a degree too.
I totally agree. And for sure, I do not advocate for any CRM administration that could result in an exportable list that talks about which of your customers are assholes. I don't advocate that, but I do think there is some qualitative aspect of can we work together to likelihood of customer success. And if we're doing everything we talked about so far, which is proper discovery and truly aligning on success criteria on the way into the evaluation, it should be near impossible to exit an evaluation without at least knowing subconsciously the answer to is underscore asshole underscore C. I just don't think you want to put it in the CRM.
Hey, Joe, one quick point I want to bring up, I just saw it in the chat, is sometimes the customer's not always right? So if you go back to the comment about the RFPs and making sure that we check all those off, maybe they've got a standard in there that there's a better standard that we can propose, using that challenger sales methodology. So, that's one thing that, certainly with the street cred we bring to our clients, going in and proposing other ideas, I think that's really important too. So they may not be right.
Fantastic call
Yeah.
out.
It's a great point that you bring up, right? Because at the end of the day, we're going to get some customers who reach out to us and they're looking for help on getting a certain outcome. And there's going to be some customers that reach out to us and they've already got a process in mind and a way that they like doing things, and they don't want to go outside of that regardless. And so those tend to be the customers that aren't as creative. Those tend to be the customers that aren't as forward thinking. And they are a lot harder to work with, because we might be able to drive to the same outcome, but we might not necessarily go through the steps that they expect and the workflows they already have, they don't want to do, and all that fun stuff. So it's always so much better working with the ones who are outcome focused as opposed to the ones who are process focused.
And I think in my experience, take it, Roxana, please.
No, the only thing I was going to say is this seems to be a really hot topic.
What do you think? You think? I think it's the nature of how B2B SaaS teams operate right now. You don't even really have an AE anymore. You have like 3 different types of AEs, and so you look from beginning to end. It's like there's a demand gen team, the BDR team, there's the ISR team, there's the AE team, there's the pre-sales team, there's the customer success, there's tech support, there's implementation, there's ProServe, and it's just a million moving pieces of like passing accounts back and forth and trying to share information that it becomes really, really critical to at least understand what the view from left to right, like a chronological like buyer motion is, and really identify where we each live in there and what we're supposed to be accomplishing and how to progress one human or one organization through a process that has 8 different people kind of coming in and out and overlapping responsibilities. And so it's an absolute challenge. And I heard Patty mention methodology, which I do think is probably, step one, and it's the next topic we're going to go to. And so I'm going to kick to Julian on sales methodology, which is our next slide. And Julian, I know that you folks are kind of either implementing or you said you were about to implement. So tell us about sales methodology and how you on the pre-sales team will be a benefit and kind of an enforcer to the sales methodology that you folks are rolling out.
It's so much harder to enforce when I'm not physically in the room with people. They just don't respect me as much over Zoom. No, we're rolling out Challenger right now. And, to the earlier points of the customer isn't always right, especially if you're in a new industry, like you have to educate your prospect and make them think a little bit differently. And so luckily, like the entire point of Chorus is to be able to record, transcribe, and analyze calls so we can easily find when our reps are adhering to methodology or not. But also from the pre-sale side, we're attached at the hip essentially, right? If you have the traditional ratio of, maybe 1 to 7, right? 1 SE to 5 AEs, you're getting a ton of different experience, right? You're seeing how people are adhering to methodology, what's working, what's not working. And every methodology, right, has to be customized and tweaked over time. So by seeing firsthand what really resonates with customers, we can then take information back to our leadership team and say, hey, in this discovery call, this reframe really isn't working for Challenger. We're jumping to the solution too early, and then quantify it with the actual data from Chorus, which is nice. Sorry for the shameless plug. It's excellent though.
It's a great call out too, because there's so many great sales methodologies, but they're always going to need a little bit of tweaking to work with our organizations, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times the out of the box doesn't quite cut it. And the other thing as well, to add to your great points, is because we're there throughout the entire sales process from start to finish, we can be paying attention to some of those areas of the sales process that sales managers might not necessarily be hyper focused, right? They might be focusing a lot on the early stages. They might be focusing a lot on the negotiation. We can bring a lot of color and a lot of information for how those middle stages get completed and how that's working, which can work out really well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, my experience in highlighting, really good methodology and best practice with AEs working with, the sales engineer is highlighting those successes, like figuring out a way if you can get invited into a sales leadership call, or if your company does an all hands type approach where you're bringing forward an example of just exceptional partnering, right? So you've got a really good fit, the right technology in the right deal, and just showing kind of how that methodology worked and how it brought, a more profitable or higher revenue ticket win, instead of, going back with the policing methodology of, talking to the sales manager, hey, you're not doing discovery early enough, but just showing what good looks like tends to work well too.
That's a great point. And Julian, I'm going to go back to something that you said earlier about using Chorus to identify where a methodology gets abandoned, and then using that to really have an honest conversation about the why. So we're very, very early. We're too early for like a purchased sales methodology, and so we're implementing some basic talk tracks and some basic like milestones in our process right now. And we had a session this week where we looked at the last 3 moments where we would have run a play that we agreed to run. And we went 0 for 3 on running the play. And so I asked Steven, what's going on here? Why aren't we doing it? And we uncovered we don't have the right collateral. We're insecure about showing the slide we had created, and we have to get in there and fix that. And so this is really where it needs to be inspected and understood why somebody's abandoning it, versus, to Patty's point, just, hey, this person just abandoned the process. Haha, they're in trouble now. And so it's less about like pointing out who's bad, and it's more about really understanding where it's breaking, and then having an honest conversation with your team about why it's breaking, and what is a reasonable attempt that they would commit to making. But then they go make that attempt. And I think that's really where the rubber hits the road, is you can have a couple of feedback loops and iteration sessions, but ultimately you've got to get to a point where your sellers commit, and then you hold them accountable after they've committed. There's only so many, why didn't you let me fix that? There's only so many turns you can do like that. Julian, you're about to pop, I think.
No, I was going to say too, exactly, right? You need to be able to identify what's going on. I think to Patty's point, the positive reinforcement, like a lot of times, especially with sales methodologies, it's hard to put into practice, right? Something, it's a new motion. It's hard to see if it actually works, right? Like you buy a sales methodology, not because you're going to get, X ROI. It's always like conceptual. We think we're going to increase conversion rates here. So for the point of partnering with AEs, right, helping enforce the process, one of the things that we do is we actually have a Slack channel for all those moments where an AE or an SE combo executes something very, very well, and we share it with the broader team or with among the different pods that we're in. So people can see firsthand, like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be done. This is the response to get. Here's where we take it to the next level and keep iterating on that process. And as SEs, to Amin's point, we almost get more at bats, right? We're on more meetings. We can try, hey, let's tweak something here. Let's see how that resonates. Oh, that worked. Let's take an example of it, share it.
And I think take it, Roxana, please. I keep switching your name from Roxana to Roxana, and I don't know why I'm doing that, but I'm just deciding.
Pronunciation works. I feel like you're just trying to really go to the origins of the name. I appreciate it. No, but I think that's such a good point of, and I saw a question come in through the chat as well that's on this topic of how do you convey the importance of following the process to the sales team. And I think it's number one, and this is something I had to learn the hard way early in my career. It is a partnership between sales and pre-sales, a real partnership. And as an SE, you can't just go, they're not doing it. They're not doing it, and get upset about it or want to put your foot down about something, right? So it's a combo of having those side conversations, those side meetings with sales management to say, hey, I'm coming to you as a partner in the organization. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm thinking, but also having numbers behind it as well. So whether it's as you said, is asphalt field and having statistics around that, or whether it's, I did a lot of data for one of my companies where we listed out every proof, whether it was just a plain demo, custom demo, or whether it was a full-blown pilot or something, right? And what were the success rates over time? Did the deal close or not close, considering what we did? And having appropriate postmortems about that so that we have data and we can talk about the data behind it. This takes time. It might take a quarter, it might take 2 quarters, but being able to show that trend, I think that AEs can be data-driven people, that if they're like, oh, if I'm going to have a 70% success rate versus a 20% one, I'm going with 70. I really need my commission check. So that really helps a lot too.
If your AEs struggle with that, you might just finish the algebra for them and say, therefore, the last, 25 trials you've done, if you did it this way, here's the difference in your win rate and your bookings and ultimately your paycheck. And I noticed that if you kind of really tie it in a knot, you might actually get the behavior change that you're looking for. I don't think salespeople are coin operated to the degree that folks like to insult them and say that they are, but I do think that they will make rational decisions when you explain how this impacts their lives. And I think just giving them the full story would help. Why don't we switch up here? I'm going to kick back to Julian to start us off on our next topic, which is, let's assume that we're running a tight process and we're getting people through the funnel. Okay. But I know that modern selling is not getting deals anymore. It's successfully launching customers who renew and expand and evangelize for you. And so a lot of folks are not just saying, how do I get a deal to close, but how to make sure the customer is actually successful. And so Jules, tell me about like the role that you play in ensuring your customers are actually successful and don't just get through, signed contract, but now you've got a negative NPS out there about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, this will depend on the industry you're in or the size of your company. But at the end of the day, if you think of the whole customer life cycle in your business, it's not just getting the sale, it's making sure you have that recurring revenue through as a customer, right? And so what we try to think about is, our job as pre-sales is not just to be pre-sales, get the deal across the line and then like, good luck, CS, see you later. So what we actually do is we try to always keep at least one person aligned from pre to post sale. And so usually right now it's just the SE at Chorus, where I'll help pre-sales, we'll do the POC if they're a good fit. When they come on as a customer, I'll stay on, make sure they have to do any other implementation work. They have different technologies. In SaaS, people keep buying all sorts of new technology. So there's constantly new things to keep thinking about and updating. But at least having someone kind of bridge the gap throughout. And if not, having enough information to successfully hand it off to the CSM, right? So that could be clips from calls. Here's a top pain point. If your deal cycle is 3 months long, you're going to have so many conversations and so much information in that pre-sales cycle. A lot of it will just get lost post-sale. So thinking about what are the key moments we need to include for them to be a successful customer and really ease that transition over.
I love the idea. Why don't we jump to Roxana and share with me how you could help the CSM kind of pick up where you left off.
Definitely. So I actually used to be a CSM myself earlier in my career before I transitioned to pre-sales only. And so part of that was I, in my very early startup days, experienced this concept of what the heck did people sell and what am I doing now? And so that's why I'm personally actually really passionate about this. And some of the things that I've implemented in a past life are Basecamp actually, in order to do this. So part of that is being able to communicate with a centralized portal with the prospect. These are all the things that we're working on. These are our timelines around the items. This is the information I need from you as part of that success criteria checklist, proof checklist, what have you. Then having a successful transition meeting over to CS and having them join in on that Basecamp site. So giving them access to that customer now instead of just a prospect, seeing all the details. What were the success criteria? What did we do for them? There's internal and external notes involved there. And also in my previous life, the solution that we were selling, there was a lot of security around it because it was a sales forecasting solution. So after the customer converted to post sales, I actually had to get off of the account. I couldn't see their data anymore. And so that also allowed for that transition of information in a secure kind of fashion. But, you know, to Julian's point, sound clips, bites here, detailing out the information. And because if you can't stay on for post sales in the same way, you might have come up with some creative solutioning or some ideas. Don't leave your CSM counterpart in the dust so that they have to figure it all out from scratch, because it's not fun for them. And it's not fun for a new customer who felt that they were really listened to as part of the sales process. And then post sale, like, do I have to start over again?
I tell you what, Roxana, on a post-sale call, it's like I fill in the form submission on your website because I have a problem and I admit I have a problem. And then I answer the BDR and I say, yes, I admit weakness. I have this problem. I get on the phone with an account exec and I say, hey, could you please help me? This is the third time I've explained my weakness to you, right? I get on to do the trial and I'm exposing my weakness through your data. And then, you know, I cut you a check, I pay you, and I get on the phone with customer success. And their first, hey, welcome aboard. Why'd you buy? It is the most offensive and frustrating experience you could ever deliver to a customer. And
Right.
it has to stop. It has to be prevented. And so I really like what you and Julian have shared. Thinking in a similar note, how about this? If we switch to the next slide, and we'll call on Patty for this because I have a
Sorry,
feeling Lenovo.
one quick thing real
Oh,
quick
go
before
for
we
it,
move on
Amin.
to the next
Yeah,
one.
please.
Well, you know, in addition to sound clips and all the other information that we put across, any workshopping we do prior to the deal closing, that's a fantastic output to share. Like usually there's a whole lot of stuff there around what their strategic vision is, what their problems are, maybe how they're going to achieve some of the things that they're looking for, and just handing that off to customer success or handing that off to implementation can work wonders.
Amazing. So we get you half built out in a trial. We do a workshop. We spend all this time together, and your actual customer success representative has no idea that those things have happened, or where you are in the deployment, or what you've uncovered in these really important workshops. Yeah, you've got to have this care package handed off. Patty, with Lenovo, how do you think about expansion potential? You know, normally it's maybe in the customer realm now. And so it's a CSM who's relationship focused and renewal tasked, and maybe not so focused on expansion revenue, but you're involved in the deals. And so how do you kind of play the, you know, cross-functional role of making sure the customer's happy and successful, but mining and surfacing those expansion potential?
Yeah, I think this is huge for the role of, sales engineering, because we know the tech roadmap for the client. One of the things that my team has done is we've done two things. I'll talk firstly about the account specific stuff. So doing customer experience days, where you go in and, go in virtually now, but, understand how they're using what we sold them, making sure they're getting value out of it, making sure kind of those shortcuts or maybe those less well-known things get highlighted. So they're really being able to leverage the technology optimally. So that's the first thing on account specific basis. The other thing we've done very well, and props to, I think a couple of my team members are on that actually led this. So Rob Kirk, thank you. We've programized some customer learning things. So in the area of selling devices to companies, deployment of those devices and how you go about managing the life cycle is really important. So we'll put together like a customer learning and have the sales engineer do a webinar or an event to clients, so they're getting value out of understanding, okay, now I've bought, how do I optimally deploy the devices. So we'll figure out areas for that to put it on YouTube, social media, whatever forum, but make sure that we have those things recorded.
Beautiful. And I mean, I know you have a background in customer success or customer experience. So do you want to add in?
Yeah, so similar to Roxana, coming a bit from that world. I spent a decade there, and yeah, I've definitely got some strong views on this subject, because if pre-sales isn't heavily involved in expansion and upsell, like y'all are missing the boat. Like, this is the best group to do it. So thinking about my experience in the world of customer success, things tend to be very, very present focused. Like, what's going on today? What are the best practices today? What are other companies doing? Which is really cool and useful. But for this purpose, we bring a little bit extra to it, because SCs by nature, we tend to be very future focused. We tend to be very focused on possibilities and how things could be. So we can sniff out some of those things of like, oh, maybe this will work really well here, maybe that'll work really well there. And if we take a step back and think about like, why does pre-sales even exist in the first place? If the products sold themselves, people wouldn't need us. If every time it was a natural fit, you just take it off the shelf and you're great, they wouldn't need us. We're really useful in situations where the product now has different applications that we need to explain why it's good for that application. It's not as obvious as it is with when products potentially first start and they're very narrow in their focus. So yeah, if you're not leveraging your SCs for expansion, you should get on that.
Totally on board. We've got one final topic, and then we'll take a question from the audience. And this topic is actually, I love this. I work really early stage. I like to go early, and so product feedback, getting back to the R&D team. I'll kick to Patty on this one. How do you make sure the right information gets back? Complete information, useful information, and not just like, I need this for one deal type information.
Right. It's the most important deal.
Oh yeah.
One thing that's really cool, for the first time in a multi-decade career in pre-sales, I work in an organization that physically sits with product management. So what we have done, since we are a multi-product portfolio company, we have leads or captains that are mapped to the specific product manager. So anytime there is upstream R&D information coming and we need to be aware of it to supplant ideas with our clients, we will share that with our captain, and then they will enable the rest of the organization. And then conversely, if we get some voice of customer feedback and we see some themes developing, we will work directly with product management to be that strong voice when they're going back to R&D and prioritizing list of new product features. So, just sitting in an organization that's so tightly with product management has been a huge upside for us.
Amazing.
I mean, I think that's the dream. Let's be serious. I think that's absolutely the dream, because everyone again is aligned, one vision, one team, one organization that's working towards that, and that's so critical. Without that, in my experience, I have set up fields in Salesforce in order to indicate close loss reasons, tying them to specific opportunities, maybe even having a conjunction with Jira as well. So if you tie it to a Jira, being able to say, okay, product actually solved this, so it'll kick open a note to the AE, letting them know, hey, you lost this opportunity 6 months ago because we didn't have this product feature. Now it exists. You might want to ping that prospect again. So those kinds of things I think are really critical, because you can also report off of it. You can report off of the accounts that are associated with that, dollar values that are associated with that, market impact associated with that. I also sit on a product advisory council in which we present to our VPs of product once a quarter, where we can review that information. And I think that's awesome, because you're heard in a way. Now, when it comes to actually seeing the results of that, that's where things get interesting. So again, I like numbers. I like seeing that data and having real conversations around those numbers. So whatever we can do to set that up in a system and share that, that shows the impact to the company. And that shows the impact to the bottom line, which is, I think, the fastest driver.
Beautiful. We're going to take one question from the audience. The next slide is for questions from the audience. And The question is from Jared, and he said, could you share a juicy example of focusing on an area that maybe the sales manager isn't honed in on? It believe Jared saying if the pre-sales team is here to enforce process, where do we really think the sales leadership is turning a blind eye and not really paying attention? So if anyone on the panel has a juicy example of where sales leadership is really not paying attention to process enforcement, feel free to share it here. And if not, I'll volunteer. As a career sales VP, I can acknowledge that there are really clear milestones that you focus on, like the cold call script. And you might look at a cold call and identify if they're using the approved messaging for marketing or if they're making up their own pitch. You might look at the meeting that was booked and ensure that they ask the 3 qualifying questions they've been told to ask. So you might look at those as a BDR leader, but you often don't look at the calls that don't get booked. It's exception style reporting. Okay. You might look at the first call script and identify if they're following the script or not, but you probably don't look at the second and third and fourth call that prospect has, because you're really just trying to look at first calls. And so what ends up happening, the dynamic is you look for milestone calls to review and coach on, and you do that by getting the first call of that stage. And often you're missing 3 or 4 examples of the exact same type of call, but it's just not the first one. And what ends up happening is you do a trial kickoff and then you review the trial kickoff call. Well, then the seller and the solution engineer goes back on for another trial support call and you don't review that one. And they go on for another trial check-in call and you don't review that one. And you really only review the milestone calls. And why are you doing 4 or 5 of the same call to a customer? Is because you didn't get it all done on the first call. And so it's just the nature of how sales leaders coach and inspect. And, Jared, if your sales leaders just aren't coaching and inspecting, then that's a different question. But it's the nature of how sales leaders like inspect and then coach that kind of creates these black holes or gaps in visibility that we're not really seeing all the examples. And so it's either bad actor not doing that part of their job. We're all meant to be coaches and mentors, or there's just a blind spot because they're looking at the cold call, the meeting that was booked, and they're not looking at every interaction on an opportunity. I try to cut my frontline sales managers some slack on this, but the truth is it's just a matter of being organized and reviewing the right number of calls by stage and making sure that you're giving like holistic feedback. But unfortunately, it just doesn't get done.
I've got some thoughts to add to that as well,
Please.
because I think that's spot on. I mean, if we flip that question on its head too, right? Like us as pre-sales leaders, when's the last time we reviewed a negotiation call? Like it's not really one of our focus areas. And if you think about your average sales managers, they'll think about when they were in the field and the milestones that they feel like they really excel at, and then they'll focus on some of those things because it's their strength. Like in the same way that we focus on discos, we focus on demos, they might focus a lot more on, the initial call, negotiations, relationship building, all that stuff that comes a bit more naturally to them. So it is a natural thing and something that we can help with.
Beautiful. So here we're going to run through a couple of announcements here at the end of the panel as we start winding up. We're promoting a charity workout with my friends at Inner City Weightlifting. You can go to innercityweightlifting.org, and if you go to the next slide, we do this every Thursday. It's at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. It's public. It's open to the entire pre-sales community. And essentially, Inner City Weightlifting rescues folks from the prison complex in America. They take folks out of juvie or out of jail, and they give them a path to earning through learning to be a personal trainer. That program, the money from these training sessions fund caseworkers and social workers and therapy and counseling. And, recidivism rates in this country are like 80% in some segments in the inner city. and the student trainers at ICW have a 15% recidivism rate. So it's actually working to keep people out of prison and keep guns off the street and keep violence down in the inner city. And it's something I'm really passionate about. And so, James and Yuji at the PreSales Collective have allowed me to advocate for this charity workout and promote it in the community. And so DM me. We're going to start to create a Slack channel and socialize this a lot more, but we're going to be doing weekly workouts with this charity for the greater good. And it's really special and important to me. So DM me if you want to join. And if not, we'll be announcing it a little bit more. Before we jump, don't forget that there's another we're going to launch a poll right here. We're always looking to get feedback and get a little bit better. So click the poll on your way out for me. And then don't miss the next session. Sorry, George, on the next slide. Don't miss the don't miss the next session. It's a month out. It's on February 16th, same time. And we're going to be talking about like buyer-led evaluations and product-led companies. And how does that impact the way sales and pre-sales have to behave if you're doing free trials right on the website, or if you're selling to developers where step one is implementing your product? How does that change the classic, sales motion? And so I think that's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of companies are starting to move to be product-led. So we'll have a nice chat about what that's like from a sales and a pre-sales perspective. Also, if you go to the next slide, we want to promote the Women in Sales Kickoff, which is actually at the end of this week. And so you can register. You can find it in the Slack channel. You can find it on the pre-sales website. And last announcement, I think, is the very last slide here, which is joining the Slack community. There are 9,000 members of the PreSales Collective, but we got started before we really got busy in Slack. And so we're going to have like a come back to Slack campaign. So tell your friends about the Slack community, tell your friends about PreSales Collective in general. I've had a really rewarding, enjoyable relationship since joining, and I've got to meet a lot of really smart people and ask some really good questions and get good advice. And it's one of the more active communities that I've seen. I'm part of, a bunch of networking and professional development communities. And this has been really, really impressive what they've been able to build. So I just want to thank you for tuning in and invite you to continue following the Real Talk series and engage with everything PreSales Collective, because it's really, really well done. And I'm grateful to be here. So thanks to the panelists. Thanks to the audience. See you folks next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us. Cheers.
Take care.